Beverly Nelson, Judge, presides.
Please be seated. Good morning. We are back on the record on case number 12 CF 1083A, State versus George Zimmerman. Are we ready to proceed?
I'll be approached for 1 moment, Your Honor.
Yes. If you'll bring in the first prospective juror.
Your Honor, age 81 is present, age 69 is not yet arrived.
Okay. Good morning, sir. You're going to continue to be called juror H81, and the attorneys are going to have an opportunity to ask you questions about the questionnaire you filled out Tuesday morning, and we're going to begin with Mr. De La Ronda.
Okay, please support.
Yes.
Good morning. Age 81. Obviously, I'm limited in this part of the voir dire or jury selection and limited to what the procedure in the questionnaire. What I mean by that is just publicity. We're trying to get from you what you've heard or seen in the news, that kind of stuff. I had an opportunity to read your comments here, and you stated that you watch the news channels at CNN. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. How about any of the local channels?
WESH.
Okay.
Channel 2.
As best you can remember, I mean, that's okay. And is that your usual, just the one you normally watch, I guess?
Local channels?
Yeah,
yes.
Sir.
Yeah.
And is CNN the one you normally watch for national news?
Yes.
Okay. You also put in MSNBC. Is that correct?
MSNBC is online.
Sure. Okay.
But I do also watch NBC.
Gotcha. And you've heard of the death of Trayvon Martin and the charges against George Zimmerman?
Yes.
Okay. What do you recall at this time about anything related to this case? That's a very broad question, and I'll pinpoint you in terms of, do you remember any of the facts of what happened or didn't happen, what's been portrayed in the media?
Well, the news that I remember was that there was an incident involving Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman.
Okay.
Mr. Martin ended up dead, and it was a very tragic situation. The news obviously reported it with different perspectives. I'm not sure I could repeat every different.
That's all right, just as best you can remember. So they had different viewpoints as to what happened. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I know that we're used to, when we talk, we're used to just kind of nodding our head when you say yes, but for purpose of the record, this court reporter needs to get a yes or no answer. So I know when we talk, I'll nod my head, but I always want to try to say yes or no.
Of course.
Okay. You also mentioned that in terms of local channels, and have you talked to people about it too, in terms of just friends or family, and have they given you their opinions about what happened or didn't happen?
Yes, it was at the time that the incident happened. It was being reported in the news. A lot of people were talking about it, including my family and friends.
Right. Okay. In terms of your first recollection of this case, was it closer in time to when it happened back on February 26th of 2012, or was it more recently? Did you first have knowledge of or obtain knowledge of the case at the beginning stages?
At the beginning stages, yes.
Okay. Did you follow the case throughout all the proceedings that have occurred up to now?
I have not.
Okay. Would your focus, I guess, or your main knowledge of the case have been at the very early stages as opposed to recently? And I'm not talking about once you were summoned down here. I'm talking about prior to being summoned.
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Okay. In other words, is most of the knowledge that you obtained based on early on as opposed to more recently?
I would say early on, but it's been in the news off and on.
Okay.
So the sound bites that you get either online or on TV, and it's periodic.
Sure. Do you always believe what's been reported in the media, either on TV, newspaper, or online?
I do not.
Okay. Why is that?
Because the media, just like most common people, are simply expressing an opinion, a view of the facts.
Okay. So you don't necessarily believe that the media just reports the facts. You believe that they interject their opinions as they're reporting the facts?
I believe that, yes.
Okay. And would that be true of both local and national news?
Yes, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's all that counts right now is what you believe and what you've been exposed to. Also, there's the new, within the last 5-10 years, there's been the new phenomenon of not just people, a broadcaster or whatever, a reporter just notating what happened or didn't happen, but also you have commentary by attorneys and by other people. Did you become used to that? And what I mean by that is, did you listen to any of those people?
I'm not sure what you mean. Did I listen to? Obviously, if they were on TV and I was watching, yes, I did.
Okay. Do you recall any commentators making comments about the case? And I'm not talking about just a broadcaster, but like a so-called legal expert talking about this is what this means and this is not what this means?
Yes, I don't recall specific commentators, but for example, the In Session show, my wife watches that quite a bit.
Okay.
And they had some talking heads on there.
Sure. Talking heads is a good way to describe the individuals. Do you always, again, believe what they say if they're so-called talking heads or so-called experts?
No, I maintain the view that most of these people are simply expressing an opinion, which is okay. I mean, they're entitled to that. But you're asking me if I believe their opinion.
Right.
And my approach is a little bit more conservative. I wasn't there when the event took place, neither were they. So I take the view that they don't have enough facts. Whatever facts they do have, they've formed an opinion they're expressing. It doesn't mean that I have to believe it.
Sure. There's also been commentary or press conferences by attorneys involved in the case. Have you heard any of that?
I can't recall.
Okay. No, okay. You don't recall any of the attorneys involved, myself or Mr. Guy or Mr. O'Mara or Mr. West, anybody comment about the case?
Well, yes, I guess as the case became more visible in the news, I do recall seeing you in the news and also Mr. McNamara.
O'Mara, okay.
I'm sorry?
Mark O'Mara.
I'm sorry. O'Mara, yes.
Okay. And the question is, when you recall seeing us, was that in the courtroom or as opposed to a press conference or something where, the media is just asking them questions and they're responding to questions?
I think there were more press conferences, not courtroom.
Okay. Would that influence you in any way? Would you take, in other words, if we didn't talk to the media and Mr. O'Mara did, would you necessarily believe what he said to the media because he said it, because he is one of the attorneys involved in the case?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
My question is, if we did not speak to the media other than on the record in court, that is on behalf of the state, and a defense made a decision to talk to the media at a press conference, would you automatically give that more weight because it was one of the attorneys involved in the case? Would you find that more credible because it was Mr. O'Mara that spoke to the media at a press conference and answered questions?
As opposed to someone else?
Right.
I would tend to give that a little bit more weight, yes.
Okay. Do you necessarily believe that everything Mr. O'Mara said in a press conference was accurate and truthful?
I would tend to believe that it would be more truthful than not. Again, in my view, also an opinion.
Sure. No, and that's all that matters here. Would you believe that Mr. O'Mara is biased in terms of in favor of his client?
Of course, yes.
Okay. Would that weigh in any way in you determining whether what he said was accurate or not? And I'm talking about a press conference, not in court.
Is your question, would that sway me to believe the believability factor?
Right.
No.
Okay. And what I'm trying to ask, maybe having a hard time asking you, is the bottom line. You heard from Mr. O'Mara at a press conference. He answered some reporters' questions. If that turns out to be not true, if he said, the moon was falling, and he said it, and I'm making something up so it's obvious that I'm not talking about the facts, because in asking you these questions, I can't tell you certain things. I have to get from you what you remember. But let's assume he had said the moon is falling, and you didn't hear any evidence about the moon is falling. and you go back, you go, hold on, Mr. O'Hara said at a press conference, or he said, 3 months ago that the moon was falling. Will you factor that in any way in arriving at a decision as to whether this defendant is innocent or whether he's guilty?
Would not.
Okay. So can you agree that anything you heard prior to actually sitting in the courtroom as a juror and listening to the evidence is completely irrelevant?
I agree with that.
I mean, you would agree to abide by the court's instructions or law and the law that says anything you heard prior to being sworn in as a juror and actually listened from that witness stand, you can have to completely disregard.
Absolutely.
Okay. If it were to enter your mind at all while you're listening to the evidence, we can't prevent that. It's in there. You can't just take it out. But can you agree that you have to just completely just take it out of the equation?
I agree.
Do you have any dispute about that at all?
I don't.
In your mind?
I don't. My personal view, if I can express it,
sure,
is that the rules of court protect the presentation of the facts. And not perfect, but to the extent that that's protected, then what's said in court under oath, presented under those rules, that's what really matters.
Okay.
Everything else is just an opinion.
Okay. All right. And would that also obviously be true about what the media has said about the case?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in terms of recalling, as you've watched TV or online, been exposed to media comments about the case and just reporting as facts, do you recall looking at any photographs related to this case?
Photographs? No.
Okay. Do you recall listening to or hearing commentary about any kind of recordings of any kind related to this case?
Yes, I do recall something about recordings.
Yes. Okay. And my follow-up question is, what do you remember the recordings being out of?
I remember the commentary about the recordings. I don't remember any specific recordings, but the commentary had to do with the recordings of the 911 call.
Okay.
And sounds that were in the background when the caller, the person making the 911 call, something to that effect.
So you didn't actually listen to the recording itself. You listened to the commentary about the recording?
Correct. I did not listen to the recording.
What do you recall the commentary at this time being about the recordings?
I want to say that in sometime, I guess, in the last month or two, there was some interest in the media reported some interest in experts having or expressing an opinion about these recordings, and that's about as much as I remember.
Sure. Did that form an impression on you one way or the other?
No.
Okay. How about any other matters related to the case that weren't specifically about, someone was shot or whatever happened? Any other matters related to the case that, in fact, that impacted the community here? That anything about the community or what was happening in the case?
I'm not sure what your question is.
Do you recall anything about? And the reason I'm having a difficulty asking, I can't tell you what facts I need to get from you. My question is, do you recall any other commentary about what was happening in the community as related to the case?
I remember that it was, and it remains to be, a fairly high-profile case, meaning that it's polarized a group of people on one side and another group of people on the other side. It's made national news.
Right.
It's impacted the community in that we've now have this case that's related to this geography, and a lot of emotions are very high, on both sides.
Sure. Did you form opinions related to that, what impact that had, whether that was good, bad, or this is the way it is, or what were your thought process when you were hearing about that on the news?
Are you asking me regarding guilt or innocence?
No, you've already covered that in terms of you stated that you have not determined or formed an opinion regarding guilt or innocence. Is that correct? Is that still true?
That is true.
Okay. My question is related to what was going on in the community's reaction or people's comments about it. Did you form any impressions as a result of that?
I did.
And what were your impressions?
My impressions were that you had a family that was grieving for the loss of their son, and you had another family that was grieving for the potential loss of their loved one to this process. And you had supporters on each side. So there's a lot of people hurting and expressing that hurt. Some people were very angry, and that's what I remember.
Okay. And do you believe in the right of free speech and the right to express yourself?
I do.
Okay. So I gather, did you find any fault in people expressing themselves in public?
No, I did not find fault in that.
Would that in any way impact you and your decision in this case as determining whether this defendant is innocent or whether he's guilty?
What part?
That fact that there was public commentary about the case.
No, that would not influence me.
You mentioned that online, and I gather that was through MSNBC, you said?
CNN, MSNBC, those are the two sources.
Sure. Okay. How about any kind of like YouTube or Facebook or any commentary regarding this case on those type of social media outlets?
Are you asking me whether I've read anything?
Yes,
like that?
yes, sir.
I may have nothing on YouTube. There may have been some posts in Facebook that I may have read. I don't believe I've commented ever on any forum regarding.
Well, that was going to be my next question. You anticipated. You have not commented one way or the other.
No, I have not.
Okay. The Orlando Sentinel, do you subscribe to it, and did you read any articles?
I did not subscribe to it, and I don't recall at this moment whether I read any. You're talking about the print version?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I don't recall that I read anything in print. Most of the information I take is online.
Okay, so online, would you have read some stories in the Orlando Sentinel about this case?
Most of the news that I read is CNN, MSNBC. Okay. I do occasionally read the online version of the Sentinel, but I don't recall reading anything about this case particularly.
If somebody, pretend you weren't a juror, and somebody came from out of town, a friend of yours, and they asked you, what's this all about? What is this George Zimmerman case about? What is this case about? What's this mention of Trayvon Martin? What would you tell them? How would you best describe to your friend that was out of town, and obviously you weren't as a juror, so you would be allowed to talk. How would you describe this case to them?
Well, I would tell them that this case is about a young man that was killed as a result of an exchange with another man. Something happened in that moment, and it's a murder trial. And that's about probably what I would say. I mean, you kind of have to live under a rock to not know about this case,
sure,
even if you're coming in from out of town.
Yes, sir. Assuming this person was in the moon or something and had lived it or under a rock. Anything else that just jumps out to you in terms of facts about this case that you might have been exposed to online or on the news in some way that you recall now?
I don't.
Anything else about what happened in terms of what the media has reported happened? Do you recall any other more facts other than a young man was killed and somebody is charged with that crime? Do you remember any other facts that may have occurred in proceedings in court that you would have been exposed to with commentary in the media?
I do remember recently there was a series of news events regarding these recordings.
Yes, sir.
And then shortly after that, there was something in the news about a continuance of the trial.
Okay.
Honestly, I have not been following this case closely. I have read about it.
Sure.
It's not that I'm not interested, but I have not been following it. So okay. I'm not sure if I could be more specific.
No, that's what you remember or don't remember. How about, do you remember anything regarding George Zimmerman? Any commentary about him or any facts that were allegedly reported by the media regarding George Zimmerman, other than what you've told us already?
Are you asking me what facts I remember?
Yeah, about George Zimmerman in particular, anything?
Okay, I'm not sure I can characterize them as facts. Again, they're coming from the media, and
well,
I take
that's
those as opinions.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, the general story that the media was reporting was that Mr. Zimmerman was involved in his community, some sort of community watch.
Okay.
And his activities in doing that work for the community led to this exchange with Mr. Martin. Other than that, I don't know anything about Mr. Zimmerman.
Sure. Okay. How about Trayvon Martin? What do you recall being discussed or portrayed in the media? And again, realizing that it's media, opinions, etc. What do you recall about Trayvon Martin?
What I recall is that he was, the way the story in the media was presented was that he was, I guess, returning home from buying candy at a store, was wearing a hoodie when this exchange with Mr. Zimmerman took place.
Anything about those two things that you recall, either regarding Mr. Zimmerman or Mr. Martin, that in any way would impact you being able to arrive at a decision in this case? Did that impact you one way or the other? I gather up to this time, and I keep repeating myself in a sense, and I know you've already expressed it, but there is no doubt in your mind that you have not formed an opinion as to the guilt or innocence of this defendant. Is that correct?
I don't have enough facts to make a value judgment, and honestly, that's how I truly feel about this. I'm neither one side or the other. And I'm not trying to apply for this job as a juror. Just to be clear, this is how I approach all of these cases that people form opinions on, they talk about, and most of the time I take the unpopular position as to say, you guys don't really know what happened there. You can't possibly know. And I get attacked a lot because of that.
Because you have not taken one side or the other?
That's correct.
Okay. You're talking about not just in this case, but in all cases that occurred?
These high-profile cases that people talk about, they form opinions quickly based on emotion and a tiny bit of information from the media, and they galvanize around this view. And I'm like, you guys don't have enough information. How do you form that opinion?
What I want to kind of segue into is what you briefly talked about, and that is discussions with people. You've had discussions with people or family regarding this case?
I've had limited discussions, yes.
And they've expressed to you their opinion one way or the other regarding, one side or the other?
Yes.
Okay. And I gather that has not influenced you in either way?
Has not.
Okay. Anything else that you recall either family or friends telling you about the case that you haven't already told us in terms of your knowledge of the case? Did they tell you something else? Oh, by the way, I heard this. And you understand I'm saying separate from the media. I'm talking about family or friends told you, oh, I read this or I heard this, and that you haven't already told us about either George Zimmerman or Trayvon Martin or about the case.
Other than expressing their views about the case?
Yes, sir.
I can't recall anything outside of that. These are general discussions where people are telling me, here's how I see it.
Sure. Okay. The next area I want to cover with you is the question dealing with the inconvenience. And as you mentioned, that you felt that it was not an insurmountable hardship, but it would be inconvenient. We realize that we ask people to take time from their everyday lives, not just in this case, in any criminal case, or any civil case, quite frankly, in the state of Florida and the nation. That's the way our justice system works. We don't require people to be lawyers or judges. We want people to come from their everyday lives and bring just good common sense and make a decision based on the evidence. But we realize in doing that, we ask people to take time from their lives at home and also with their work. So we realize that it's an inconvenience, and in some cases it's a hardship. But that's the only way our system works. If not, nobody would be able to serve. We'd never be able to have a trial. And so having said that, we have come to the conclusion, or we're estimating as best we can, both sides, that we believe that the actual trial, when we actually pick the jury, you understand we're still in the process of selecting ones, but once the trial officially starts, that it could take anywhere from 2 to possibly 4 weeks, and that the jury will be sequestered so that there's no exposure or influence by the media. You understand that?
Yes.
And having said that, do you believe you could serve? I know it would be inconvenient, as you noted, but do you believe you could serve as a juror?
A big inconvenience, but yes, I could serve.
Okay. And we appreciate that, sir. You have a
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. O'Malley.
Yes, ma'am.
Morning, sir. Go ahead.
Well, thank you.
I think you're number 40 or so that we've done this with. So we try and make it a little bit refreshing each time we talk to jurors, but of course you're hearing it for the first time. So I'm just going to give a quick overview as to why we're having this stage of the conversation, okay? And the main reason is we don't know what it is you know about the case. Mr. Del Rionda has now drilled into that a little bit, so we have a much better feel. Our concern is not as much what you know about the case. We need to know that. But the real point is whether or not whatever you know about the case you can leave on the outside of the courtroom. It sounds like you have not formed any type of opinions that would lead you down a certain path that you couldn't just leave outside the courtroom. Is that accurate?
That's accurate, yes.
Okay. If, in fact, whatever memory you might have, would you agree that that memory, if it's from information you received outside the courtroom, is going to be left outside the courtroom?
I would agree with that, yes.
The concern that we have, and the reason why we don't just ask that one question, can you leave it all outside, is we want to try and find out what you know, pictures you may have seen, like Mr. Del Rionda said, recordings you may have heard. For this reason, the media is wide open as far as what they can report, and conversations can be as wide open as you want them to be with your friends or colleagues. The courtroom information is much more restrictive. Would you agree?
I do agree, yes.
Sure. So we want to make sure that if you remember something that you think is going to show up in a courtroom, the recording, for example, or a picture that you may have seen, or just some factoid that you just have in the back of your mind, that if you don't hear it here in the courtroom, that you can exclude it from your consideration as a juror. Agreed?
I understand.
And something that it sounds like, based upon your lack of strong opinions about the case, that you can do?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything in your conversation with Mr. Del Rionda, or just now that we've talked a bit about the purpose of this inquiry, that comes to mind as far as what you think about this case or what you've talked to other people about it? Anything else to discuss or go over now?
Sorry, I missed that.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay, start over.
Siri in between. Whose phone is on? Okay, if y'all haven't learned by now, if your phone goes off, you're out of the courtroom, so please make sure they're on vibrate. Thank you. Go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
And not to make light of it at all, but you didn't really get what I just said a moment ago?
Yeah, I had trouble with I understood what you were saying. I had trouble with the question you were asking me.
Sure, no problem. Just want to make sure that if anything comes to your mind that we have not discussed here today, to sort of put on the table. If something comes up in your jury deliberations where you remember some factoid that didn't show up in the courtroom, that you can set that aside and not consider it.
Yes, I can do that.
The judge is going to give you some fairly specific instructions, and they make sense. You actually distilled it very well in answer to your question earlier when you said that you understand the process is pretty well protected, and if that process is followed, then you get to consider the information you hear and nothing else. Do you agree to follow that?
I agree with that, and if I can contextualize my earlier response, I was a juror once before, and there was a question that came up about some of the evidence. And we framed the question for the judge, and what put an exclamation point on this specific topic that we're talking about is that the judge returned with a response saying you can only consider what was presented. that made all the sense to us. And we said, all right, regardless of what other questions we have, we only have to go with what was presented.
So in that context, you may be looking for an explanation or another piece of evidence or something that you thought was missing, as that previous juror, and the judge said what she would say here to you today, if you don't hear it from that witness stand or get it presented as evidence, there is nothing else for you to consider.
That's correct.
And that you are limited only to that information which you get properly through our rules here today or during the trial.
Yes.
You've mentioned a bit about this being a high-profile case or the fact that it was polarizing people. The fact that this is a high-profile case, is that of any concern to you of your ability to sit as a juror and hear the facts and only listen to what happens here?
Well, it wouldn't influence how I view any of the facts or form an opinion after the evidence is presented. It wouldn't impact me there. But I do wonder what happens to jurors after high-profile cases. That question has crossed my mind.
Okay. The judge may well address that in a presentation to you. Let me tell you what we know so far. As you know, you are an anonymous juror, as all the jurors are right now, all the potential jurors. That's why we're only calling you by number, if at all, and not name. Though they're immediate in the courtroom, they are not focused on you, and by rule of court, they cannot show your picture. So you are protected in that sense. Your anonymity is going to continue to be protected. Were you to sit on the panel, the jury, you will still be anonymous, and the media cannot show the jury as it sits in the courtroom. In addition, the court has already ruled that the information about jurors is going to remain anonymous throughout the trial and for some period of time afterwards, cooling off period, some period of time that will allow whatever the reverberations are from a verdict, whatever it is, to work its way through our community, to work its way through the system, and to make sure that there's not an immediate reaction one way or the other that might fall upon the jurors. Does that address that concern?
It does.
Okay. And it sounds as though you would be in favor of maintaining that anonymity as long as practical?
I would, yes.
Okay. Having said that, and realizing that it may not be forever, can you still sit as a juror on this case, pay attention only to the facts, only to the law, and in effect exclude not only facts that you may have heard that we've just talked about you excluding, but also can you exclude from your consideration any of the pressures, the social pressures, the community pressures that may be outside the courtroom? Can you leave that truly outside the courtroom during your deliberations?
Absolutely. I think I said earlier that I'm often on the wrong side of these discussions with my friends now. I mean, this is something that I just carved my own path.
Have there been any friends of yours that have taken strong opinions one way or the other on this case?
Not real strong. Okay. They expressed their beliefs, but not. When you said strong, you did say strong opinions.
I did, yes, sir.
Yes. No.
To the extent that those friends of yours have opinions, and let's just say that your verdict is in opposition to those opinions, how would you handle that with your friends?
How would I handle it?
Sure. You come back with a verdict and they say, you know, we had a conversation 6 months ago and I told you what I thought and I really thought this. And it was opposed to your verdict. Concerns with being able to address that?
My family and friends pretty much know that when I take a position, it's a studied one and that's going to be my opinion on it. If they're really my friends, they're going to know that I stand by what I believe.
Okay. May I have just a moment, Your Honor? Appreciate the time, sir. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. If you'll remain seated and counsel when you're ready, approach. Yes.
We may have the juror number confused because we're all trying to stay just with the number as opposed to the name. Are you one of the jurors that has some pending cases in front of Your Honor on, obviously, civil matters?
I have 2 civil cases.
Okay, I thought so. May I inquire a little bit about that without disclosing what they are, without disclosing your name?
Sure.
Okay. Are those civil cases that are pending?
Yes.
Okay. Is there more than one, I assume?
There are 2 cases that are related.
Okay. How long have they been pending before Your Honor?
Judge Nelson was brought into this, substituted in for a prior judge
Gotcha.
this year.
Okay.
But the one case has been pending since 2008, another one since 2011.
Okay. So they're civil in nature, and they have been pending before another judge. And I know at some point Judge Nelson transferred from the criminal division to the civil, so she automatically assumed the cases that you had pending. Is that correct?
I believe that's how.
Okay. You were dealing with another judge prior to this year.
Yes.
Okay. The nature of those cases, without disclosing the name or anything of your company, do you recall what, they're civil in nature, do you recall what matters they deal with?
I do.
Okay. Are you able to tell us without disclosing?
The 2 cases are related. They involve matters with the Homeowners Association, dispute over some easement property rights, and...
I hate to interrupt anyone, particularly a juror, but I think the inquiry is more focused than the substance. Is that a concern?
Juror H81, the fact that I am the judge that's presiding over those 2 cases, will that in any way factor upon your ability to make a fair and impartial decision in this case?
It will not. I raised it earlier just to make sure that we didn't wait till the 11th hour and then bring it up. But I did raise it with the deputy.
Right, and we were told, and I thank you for that. Those are the kinds of things that we do need to know so we can ask the question. So your response to that, let me rephrase, is that will have no effect whatsoever on your ability to sit as a fair and impartial juror in this case?
It will not.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, counsel, approach or no change?
No change.
Okay. Yes, and bring us the next one. Thank you, sir. If you'll follow Deputy Jarvis.
Your Honor, H69 is present.
Please be seated. Good morning. And you will continue to be referred to as Juror H69. And the attorneys are going to have an opportunity to talk to you about the jury questionnaire you filled out last Tuesday morning. And we're going to begin with Mr. De La Ronda. You may proceed.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
As Judge Nelson indicated, our inquiry at this time in terms of you being a potential juror is limited to what exposure you've had in the case about the media. Okay, so I'm going to be asking you some questions. I know you filled out already a questionnaire. We've had the opportunity to read it. And you said that you found out about the case from TB, and it's I know where you work, so don't mention where you work on purpose. I've got it here already.
Okay.
But where you work is somewhere near that area, without telling me where you work. Is that correct? Where it happened?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, hold on. I'm sorry. Let me read it. I guess I couldn't understand you writing. I apologize. May I see the court's copy or the original? I apologize to the deputy. They make copies of these, and sometimes when they make a copy, it's not as... Okay, thank you. Let me see if I can get to what I'm trying to ask you is, you mentioned that you got information about the case from TV and also at work?
The TV is at work in a cafe at the first floor.
Okay.
So walking by, getting a drink or getting a snack.
I got you. The TV at work is where you saw it. Okay,
yes.
Now I apologize. And you also stated that you knew Zimmerman killed Martin and Sanford, and I don't know under what circumstances exactly or what Provoked, thank you.
You're welcome.
I take my glass off to read this. I do know Martin was not the young child originally painted by the media.
Right.
Okay. So would your exposure to this case have been back in February of 2012, or was it more recently?
It's whenever it happened.
Okay. And is your exposure to this case through the media been mainly at work when the TV is on, or do you at night, watch TV, or in the morning? Or?
No, I don't watch TV at my house. The only thing I as far as news that I actually look at is the Wall Street Journal. So more global news and national.
Okay. And so your focus is then just the Wall Street Journal from a business standpoint? Okay. Sometimes they also they do comment on cases, or they do give facts besides business, no?
They do, but usually it's more of international, what's going on in Syria, that the courts overturned a patent for a gene that was recently, stuff like that.
Okay. So you don't recall there being any story while you're surfing sometimes YouTube or anything like that related to this case?
If I look at YouTube at all, it's usually to find a song, not to look at any other type of broadcast.
Sure. Okay. So your, I guess, exposure from the media standpoint in this case was just on TV where you work?
Correct.
Okay. And would that have been just in walking by, glancing at stuff, or are you again, don't tell me the place you work, but are you sitting at a desk where you're the TV's right in front of you and you're looking at it at all times?
No, it's walking by. I'm away from TV or from disruption where I work.
All right. Tell me as best you can recall what you remember hearing on TV about this case.
Well, it was very obvious that someone was killed and that they were shot. At first, I know that they were putting a picture of a young child, but then later on I heard through, I think, a comment of a coworker that that's not accurate, that the media was trying to portray something else. And I left it at that.
Okay. Anything else you know about the case on TV?
I know it was in Sanford.
Okay, sure.
No, that's...
Okay. Do you remember seeing any photographs of any type related to this case on TV?
Probably the picture of he wasn't a child. From what I understand, he was older.
I'm sorry, you saw a picture of...
I guess it was a picture of the victim or the person that passed away.
When you saw the picture of the victim, you're talking about Trayvon Martin?
Yes.
Okay. And do you recall what the picture looked like when you saw the picture of him?
Not exactly, no.
Okay. Do you recall anything he was wearing or anything?
Okay. No.
Okay. And that's fine. If you don't remember, that's perfectly all right to say you don't. Do you remember what he was doing, whether he was just standing there, or was he, moving around, or what the setting was that the picture was in relation to the victim?
I think it was just a picture of him standing somewhere, posing.
Okay.
Posing.
I got you. Do you remember any other photographs related to this case? Do you remember any photographs of anything related to what happened there, or Mr. Zimmerman or anything like that?
Well, I do know. I did see a photograph of Mr. Zimmerman.
Okay. What do you remember that photograph being of?
I think it was just his picture. I don't remember what he was doing or what he was wearing. It was just...
Okay. All right. And just a picture just of his face?
Of his face.
Okay. Anything just from chest up?
Yes, chest up.
Anything just other than his face that you recall?
No.
Okay. Do you remember any other photographs? And I'm trying to, trying to get into your mind in terms of what you remember, and I appreciate you being, as accurate as you can be.
I honestly don't.
Okay.
Right now.
Do you remember any kind of videos of any kind or recordings of any time, listening to it or watching any of those?
No.
Okay. Do you remember any commentary about either photographs or if there were recordings or video in this case? Do you remember any commentary about that?
The only comment is about the picture of the boy, that it wasn't exactly up to date. It wasn't accurate.
Okay. And I believe you stated that was not through the media, but through a coworker.
No, through a comment, right.
Okay. And how did that come about? How did that manifest itself? Did you and the coworker sit down and talk about the case?
No. It's more of just passing by the cafe. People meet with their coworkers while they're eating lunch.
Sure.
And they'll make comments. So if they sit there and they're watching TV, they'll probably talk about whatever's on TV.
Okay. So what brought this up? Did you ask about, like, did you hear about that, or did she or he?
More of me just walking by.
Okay.
And listening to it.
Right. And so this person would have told you that that photograph was not accurate, I think you stated?
Not me, to someone else.
Sure. No,
right.
But the person told you that that photograph was, I think you stated?
It wasn't up to date. It wasn't exactly how he looked like now. It was more like when he was a child.
Right. Was that person expressing an opinion that in some way related to that photograph? I guess I'm trying to find out why
they mentioned it?
Yeah, why that person would have mentioned that.
I think the purpose was just to say that the media wasn't providing all the information.
Okay. And was there some discussion about that, like you can't trust the media, or,
no.
Somebody's trying to deceive somebody, as you stated, Mr. Martin, or you called him the victim, was being deceived by one part or the other?
I object.
You don't need to approach the bench. Please rephrase your questions.
Sure. My question is, was there some discussion about the photograph?
No. To make you understand, my position, I'm on the phone, so I'm literally running downstairs to get something, and then I have to run back. So I don't really have time for conversation. I can tell people, and then I have to kind of just run off if I have anything to tell them. So there's no conversation that I engage. It's just more of whatever I hear as I'm running by.
But you notated here that, let me read it to you again, just make sure. I do know that Martin was not the young child originally painted by the media.
Right.
And you're saying that's what that person told you? Did that person make reference to as a young child? Or are those your words that you've interjected in there? Or?
Those are my words that I've interjected.
Okay. Why did you make reference to, in terms he was not a young child, that was the media portraying him originally as a young child? Or
I believe the picture that I saw would portray as a young child. Okay. I mean, I don't know. I can't recall what he looked like.
So you have no knowledge, do you have any knowledge of how old Trayvon Martin was at the time he was killed?
No, not his exact age.
And this co-worker told you that the media was misrepresenting, or I think you stated the young child was painted in the media, they were trying to paint it, the media was trying to paint him as a young child?
Younger than his actual age.
Okay. When you saw the photograph, did you also come to that conclusion?
Again, I can't recall the photograph I saw.
Right. Okay.
I just know when you walk by, you think, okay, that's person looks young, but I didn't think much of it. I didn't think, well, maybe how old would he be?
Sure. You didn't know whether that photograph was accurate or not.
Right.
Okay. I guess my follow-up question, when this co-worker told you that, did you say, no, that's not true? Or, oh, yeah, I believe you? Or did you just not offer an opinion?
Well, like I said, it wasn't that. It was commented directly towards me. It was commented in a group, and I was just walking by.
To somebody else?
Right. So I wasn't in the conversation. I just overheard it and kept going.
Okay. So I guess your purpose is, in writing this down here, is that you had heard that from somebody and you wanted to let us know that you had heard that?
Correct, because I was advised to write whatever we know.
Right. You didn't automatically agree with the person when they stated that?
No, I didn't think anything of it. Okay. I can't make my own conclusion.
Okay. And my question is because I just, and maybe it's my fault when I was reading it, I just took it as you assumed that fact was accurate. That he had been misrepresented by the media as a young child, and he really wasn't.
I guess I could assume that it's accurate, but I mean, I don't even know how old he was.
Okay. Did that form an impression on you when you heard that fact from that coworker?
No.
Okay. And why is it that you notated that, but no other facts? You really don't know any other facts about the case at all?
No, because I don't tune in to more local news.
Okay, so your focus is
Wall Street Journal. And my focus more on, exactly, okay. More because I just finished college this year. I've had a whole bunch of research to do, so anything that involved business is where my focus has been.
Gotcha. Versus what's going on in the local community.
Right.
Okay. Did you have any other discussions with any other co-workers about the case, or family or friends about the case?
No.
Did that co-worker express an opinion to you at any time about their feeling?
I can't even tell you who the person was. It's just someone that works in my building.
Sure. Let's just talk about in general about people at work.
Mm-hmm.
Were there people at work that express an opinion like he is guilty or he's innocent, or, what a shame what happened to Trayvon Martin? Did they express any opinions one way or the other about the case?
I'm sure they did, but I can't tell you exactly what someone would say.
Do you know whether they were more supportive, if we can term it that way, of George Zimmerman, or whether they were more supportive of Trayvon Martin?
I don't know.
Okay. When you first heard about the case, did you form impressions one way or the other, either in sympathy for Trayvon Martin or in favor of George? Did you form opinions one way or the other on the case?
The only opinion I form is that it's sad someone lost their life. That happens all the time, unfortunately.
What do you mean it happens all the time? People are murdered all the time?
Somewhere along the way, people are losing their lives.
You have a question to say?
Yes.
Is that what you're trying to say, that you're not paying that much attention because it happens all the time?
Because it's nothing you can do about it. It's a fact of life.
Okay. You didn't put any more emphasis on the shooting and the death of Trayvon Martin versus other people. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. And when you say it happens all the time, you're talking about in a criminal setting, I'm assuming. Or what do you mean in terms of just, in terms of like what's happening nationwide, or I'm trying to get a feeling for what you mean by it happens all the time?
I'm referring to just people losing their life. Not just in shooting. Sometimes people lose their life because of illnesses. Because of an illness. So I just mean in general, death happens all the time. I know some people are probably making a big scene, but unfortunately it wasn't enough to catch my attention for me to put more time on it.
Are you one of those individuals that just doesn't like to watch, certain type of news versus others, more?
No. I mean, if it's there, I'll watch it or read it. But again, I'm more focused on international and world news.
Okay. Commentary with any family members? Do you recall having any discussion about this case or about George Zimmerman or about Trayvon Martin with any family members?
No.
Okay. Never at all? No opinions, just like what's going on in the community related to this case at all, if there is anything?
No.
Okay. Based on your exposure to the media, and I know it's been on TV or at work, do you remember what channel that was on?
I have no idea.
Okay. Do you remember listening to any commentary by people who comment about the case? What I mean by that is sometimes it's just a newscaster saying, person walked down the street, and there's other people saying, well, the person was walking, but he was walking real fast. In other words, people commenting or giving their opinion while they're commenting about the case.
Well, to give you some insight, I have been on a leave of absence for a few months from work. So
I'm sorry, what?
I was on a leave of absence for a few months from work. Okay. So anything I heard about the case was when it happened. After that, from towards the end of last year to almost recently, I have been almost entirely absent from work.
You were not in tune to what was going on?
No, so I mean, that's why I can't tell you if people were talking about it. The only thing I heard is when it happened.
Okay. When you say a leave of absence, were you like completely out of the state or out of the county, or?
No, I was out of just my job.
I'm sorry.
I was not at work.
You were not at work, and at home you don't pay attention to the news at all?
We don't watch news, no.
Okay, all right. How about online when you're looking up the Wall Street Journal or other matters, discussions with other people about kids and stuff on Facebook? Did you have, by chance, look at any commentary on people commenting about the case?
No, I don't surf the web often. But no, when I go to the Wall Street Journal, that was not anything I saw, not in the articles they had.
Sure. So you at no time while you're just looking up the Wall Street Journal or you just didn't happen to or on Facebook or anything, see any kind of headline, even if you didn't read the story about the case? You understand what I'm saying? Just
a headline. No.
Okay. And I gather you stated that you have not formed an opinion as to the guilt or innocence of the defendant, George Zimmerman, correct?
I guess so. That's an odd way of asking the question.
What do you mean by that?
Everyone is supposed to be innocent until proven guilty.
Okay.
So, I can't tell you, oh, yes, he's innocent. I can't say, oh, yes, he's guilty. So to answer your question, no, I haven't formed a concrete opinion.
Yeah, the question was if your answer to question one was yes, have you formed an opinion as to the defendant's guilt or innocence? And you stated no.
No. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And is that based on because you believe in one of the hallmarks of our Constitution is that a person is presumed innocent until proven guilty? Is that why you said that, or were you just answering in general?
For both. When I read the question, that's exactly what I thought. That's an odd way to state a question.
How would you have stated it? How would you have asked it?
I don't think there's actually a better way of asking it. I understand what the purpose of the question is, just to make sure that there's no bias or someone's not leaning one way or the other, which is why I answered no. But yes, it should be everyone's innocent until proven guilty.
Or when you say everyone is innocent, or everyone is presumed to be innocent?
Presumed to be innocent.
Okay. So have you already made a conclusion that he is innocent as opposed to presumed innocent?
No.
Do you understand the distinction?
Yes.
Okay. How would you?
If I were to say that I've made a conclusion that he's innocent, it's that is my opinion, and it probably won't change. If I'm assuming that he's innocent, is that I'm applying that just like to everyone else. I assume you're innocent until something is shown to prove otherwise.
So you believe in the presumption as opposed to he's innocent. In other words.
Correct.
Objection asked.
That was his answer, too.
Okay. What I'm trying to find out is, are you leaning one way or the other? Forget about the opinion, but were you leaning one way or the other in this case?
Same objection.
Okay, that has been asked and answered.
You weren't leaning in favor of Trayvon Martin, or were you?
Objection. Same issue.
I don't think I've asked that question.
He hasn't asked it that way, so overruled.
Were you leaning towards Trayvon Martin?
I'm not leaning towards any side.
Okay. How about any family or friends? Have they been leaning one way or the other, either in favor of George Zimmerman or in favor of Trayvon Martin?
I must have an odd group of family and friends because we don't discuss it.
At all?
We're more centered on what's going on in our family with issues and baby and.
Sure. Okay. Anything related to the case that you heard about on the news, even in passing, or just from talking to friends about how the community, if there was any reaction to this case?
I live very far from here, from Sanford.
Okay, don't tell us again.
I know. I'm just saying that.
Sorry.
I'm just saying that as far as the community reaction to where I live is not the way that I'm assuming the community over here reacted.
Do you remember how?
I can't say that I would go anywhere in my community or at stores and hear anything about the case.
Do you remember hearing anything in the media about whether there was or not a reaction in the community about this case?
I suppose so. Like what type of reaction?
Yeah, what do you recall, if there was anything at all?
I can't say if there's anything. I don't remember for sure. I mean, I could assume there's severe reaction, but I can't tell you, well, this happened or people gathered, or I don't know.
At this time, do you remember anything else about this case that just pops up? And let me ask you this way. Assuming you weren't a juror, right? And assuming somebody came from out of town, let's say they came from another country, not even the United States, and they had never heard about the case, but they're spending the week with you because they're college friends, whatever. They moved to, New Zealand, okay, and they come in. They said, "What the heck is going on?" Assuming you're not a juror, you're allowed to talk.
Right.
They said, "What's going on in this? What's this? All this media stuff about? What is this George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin? What's this about?" What would you tell them?
Honestly, the only reason I know both names is because I'm here. So I would tell the person, I really don't know what's going on. All I know is one person shot the other. But unfortunately, I didn't even know the names of the people involved until I came here.
Sure.
And then it kind of, okay, yeah, I think I heard something about this.
And if they were to ask you, one person shot another, would you tell them who shot who?
Well, not by name. I mean,
Okay. And if they ask you, what was the shooting about, what would you tell them?
I don't know.
Okay. If they ask you, how did the shooting occur, what would you tell them?
I don't know.
Okay, so you don't know anything about how it happened. I'm trying to pry your mind
Right.
out.
I understand. No, I really don't know, so I wouldn't be able to answer the question.
Okay. The other area I wanted to cover with you is you were asked questions about how long the jury would expect a trial to take, and we realize people take time from their everyday lives, and it's a sacrifice for everybody. There's a hardship of some time, and the question is whether it's an insurmountable hardship. The question is, or let me paraphrase this, or let me give you some context in terms of you being able to answer my question. We have both estimated that as a state of defense that this trial will take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. That's what we're estimating. That is, once we pick a jury. So assuming you're a jury, you're picked, then the trial when it actually starts will take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. And the court has also made a determination so that the jury is not influenced in any way, that the jury will be sequestered. In other words, your contact with family, friends will be severely limited. In terms of sequester, you'll be housed somewhere altogether. And so the question is, would that present a hardship for you?
It would.
Okay. Tell me about that in terms of, because we realize it presents a hardship to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But the question is, an insurmountable hardship?
Well, the hardship would be more of the contact with my family. Not financial, because I'm fortunate to work for an employer that pays me my full salary. However, I am 5.5 months pregnant. So,
congratulations.
Thank you. So it would be hard in the sense that it's our first child. My husband's trying to be involved.
Double congratulations.
Very happy grandparents. So that would be the hardship, not having them involved.
You're going to have to do sonograms and all that other kind of stuff.
Right, and I mean, my family comes with me. It's a full room when we go to sonogram. So.
Well, the question probably most people want to know in this courtroom is, it a boy or a girl?
It's a girl.
Okay,
it's a girl.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. May I have a moment, Your Honor? Follow up the thing. It kind of started off because of what you wrote down in terms of the misrepresentation of the age of Trayvon Martin, as you understood it. That friend that told you that, or the coworker that told you that, did they tell you that the media was representing, or somebody else was misrepresenting that? Assuming it was a misrepresentation.
They didn't tell me. All I heard was that it seems like it wasn't the actual age, or that he was older than what was originally portrayed. So I don't know if it was the media, or I don't know where the information came from.
And you don't know whether it was that. You didn't form that opinion. It's just somebody else told you?
Somebody else
Did you
mentioned
agree
it.
with that opinion of that person?
I don't know. I don't know his age.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Mr. West?
Yes, thank you. Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
My name's Don West. I'm one of the attorneys on behalf of Mr. Zimmerman, who you were introduced to earlier in these proceedings, seated over here at the end of the table, and Mark O'Mara, an attorney working on the case as well, and Robert Hirschhorn, who's assisting us at this time with the case. Just take a deep breath and relax to the extent you can. I know you've got a whole lot going on in your life right now. Let's talk, I guess, about the last thing first.
Okay.
You mentioned that from a hardship standpoint, you don't have a financial hardship should you serve, even if you were sequestered for the expected time of 2 to 4 weeks, because your employer pays your salary?
Correct.
Okay. The concern you have is what I heard you to say is being in less contact with your family during that time period?
Correct, because I'm pregnant.
Part of the sequestration, while it's very isolating in some respects, would and could include visitation. It doesn't mean you could have no contact with your family at all during this period, but it would be far different than what it sounds like you have now.
Right.
Okay. So in that sense, you would still be able to visit with husband and extended family. Let's talk, though, for a second, though, about the medical side of it.
Mm-hmm.
Are you currently under physician's care, regular care?
The normal office visits for prenatal care.
Okay. And how often are those?
Right now it's once a month, so I have one scheduled for next month, and then a quick follow-up for like blood work just to make sure everything's okay as well.
So everything's fine then?
So far, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, do you know when your next appointment would be?
I do. I know my next 2 appointments. Normal office visit is July 3rd in the morning, and then I have one on July 9th.
Mm-hmm. And could you reschedule them if necessary?
It depends. As far as blood work, yes, because the labs do work on weekends, on Saturdays. As far as the specialist, I'm not sure.
I'm just trying to think as we talk
Right.
here if there could be an accommodation of some sort. If you were on the jury and were actually in the sequester status and you had an appointment, how long do the appointments typically take?
It depends. If I'm not doing any blood work on this next one, it should be about 30 minutes.
Could it be done before 9 o'clock?
My appointment is at 8 and 8:30. So they are before 9.
Mm-hmm. So realistically, if you were able to make an early appointment, as early as the doctor would see you, 7:30, 8 o'clock, it's possible that you could have your appointment and be escorted back to the courthouse pretty close to 9 o'clock.
Correct.
If the court could accommodate you in that respect, you'd feel okay about that?
As long as I can talk to my family.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, and you can. There can be calls and visits and that sort of thing. However, in sequestration, though, you are kept separately in that you would be staying separately from your family.
Right.
Follow what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it. So I understand from what you're saying it would be a challenge, but I get the sense that that because of the importance of your civic duty and all of that stuff, that you could make it work?
I can make it work as long as I set up communication with my family.
I don't know the details of that, frankly, so I can't help you any more this morning than what we've already said. I don't know that there's been a schedule devised or how those calls or visits would take place, except usually that's available in these situations.
Okay.
It sounds like almost all of your time is spent at work and with family, and except for a specific interest in the news, you don't otherwise pay much attention to what's going on.
Correct.
And I take it that this particular case didn't grab your attention specifically, so it was not a whole lot more to you than any other news story?
Correct.
I know there's been some talk about pictures. Do you remember seeing any pictures at all of George Zimmerman that caught your attention other than just having seen his face, perhaps?
That caught my attention in an interesting way.
That showed something connected to the case.
Oh, no.
How about the same with Trayvon Martin? Do I understand the only picture you saw was a face view at some point?
Correct.
Did you form an opinion or an impression in your mind how old Trayvon Martin may have been in that particular photo?
No. I wish I could recall the photo. I know I saw it. I just don't remember.
Can you remember any of the clothing or the background?
Might have been wearing a white shirt, but I'm not 100% positive.
And there's nothing distinctive enough in your mind that makes you say, oh, I know he was any given age?
No.
Okay. At some point, though, a coworker said, did you know that the pictures were at a younger age than he was at the time of his death?
It wasn't a question. It wasn't directed at me. It was towards someone else. But yes, they mentioned that it seems like the pictures were not up to date.
And did you ever see another picture that has been represented to be more up to date?
No.
Did you ever form the impression that the media was purposefully trying to deceive the public?
No. That's an odd way of saying it. I guess in my mind, I know that the media is not always accurate. So I can't say that they're doing it on purpose, but that's probably why I don't pay as much attention the first time or the second time around unless I'm really interested, because the information probably will not be accurate.
Are you a bit skeptical then?
I'm skeptical. Yes, I'm skeptical.
And especially about the news?
About what the media might say immediately after something occurs.
What's your sense of that in terms of what the media says immediately as opposed to maybe later on about the same thing?
My sense is that they're trying to get news out. The more dramatic, maybe the better. That way it'll get people's attention. And I realized that it would be impossible for them to have all the information that happened.
Are you, from hearing you correctly, you're basically saying there's an urgency to get whatever they have out there.
Exactly, even if it's not the complete story.
And then as more information may be gained, then the story can be developed further.
Correct.
Do you assume that's what happened in this case too?
I assume that's happened to all the cases.
As I remember, I think what you described was seeing this case on TV was just more of a glance in a common sort of restaurant cafe area.
Correct.
You'd be there having a snack or coffee or something?
Getting a drink.
And it would be on in the background?
I don't stay there. I just go in and get what I need and leave.
So in that sense, it would just be for the seconds or minute or two you were there to pick up what you'd gone to get?
Correct.
Would the sound be on?
Yes, depends, but usually it is.
And do you remember hearing or seeing any images now about this case that stick out in your mind at all?
No.
Have you ever been present at a social organization or church or where the case has come up? Not that you necessarily participated in the discussion, but that other people were talking about.
I am part of a church. I think the only time I heard anyone refer to the case was during a sermon that the pastor mentioned the fact that someone lost their life. But the sermon, we didn't go into what happened. It's just more the fact that someone lost their life.
What was the focus of the sermon in connection with the case?
Life, salvation.
Just precious.
Life after death, if you're saved, type of thing. And that was a while ago.
So
that was a while ago, I think.
I take it that in the sermon, no one took sides as to who was right or who was wrong leading up to Trayvon Martin's death.
No, because the focus wasn't what happened. The focus is people dying and accepting Christ before you die, so you're saved.
Is that what you meant, sort of, when you made the comment, these things happen all the time? That there are situations where people lose their lives? And
right.
that's unfortunately a fact of our existence.
Right.
Were you weighing in with any comment on this case when you said that?
No.
Were you suggesting in any way that George Zimmerman was guilty of a crime, or that you know enough about the case to say that, well, he must have murdered Trayvon Martin?
I definitely don't know anything about the case to say that. When I made that comment, it was just more of people lose their life all the time. Not necessarily, unfortunately, being shot, but just in general. That's why when you do my type of work and I see people losing their life, you become desensitized a little bit to it. So you know people lose their life.
Would you be open to considering all of the evidence that's presented in this courtroom and disregarding anything you may have heard or think about the case in making your decision whether George Zimmerman is guilty or not guilty?
Yes, I would be open to hearing all of the information.
How long have you lived in this area?
21 years.
How long in Seminole County?
Objection to
20.
relevances in this particular matter?
It's a predicate question.
Okay, I'll give you some leeway.
21 years.
Do you know where this event occurred? Do you have any friends that live there?
In Sanford?
More specifically, in the community where this took place.
Oh, no.
1 minute. Thank you. Nothing else.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. If you'll still remain seated for a moment. Counsel, when you're ready, approach. Juror H69, if you'll please follow Corporal Dems, and can we have our next juror?
H86.
Good morning. Please be seated. You will continue to be referred to as Juror H86. And the purpose for today's questioning is for the attorneys to ask you about the questionnaire that you filled out last Tuesday morning. And we're going to begin with Mr. De La Ronda. You may proceed.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
As Judge Nelson indicated, our limited inquiry today is just about what exposure you've had to the media, kind of prod you in terms of what you remember.
Okay.
And I know that you've already filled out the questionnaire, and it's, if I could read it, let's make sure I've got it right. Briefly discuss case with coworkers and family a couple of weeks ago. I have not been following the case or know any details. I know Trayvon Martin is deceased, but do not know Zimmerman's role or involvement. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk about your exposure to the case. At any time, your exposure to the case through TV at all?
Have I?
Yeah.
No.
Never, even at the beginning stages when it happened back in February of last year?
Just commercials of the news saying that they would talk about it, but I never followed it.
Like
No.
breaking news type thing, the case? Okay. And you didn't follow up on that at all?
Mm-mm.
Okay. And I know when we speak, I can tell you're shaking your head or you're nodding your head, but for purposes of the record, this lady needs to get a yes or no answer. I can tell that I can tell you're talking to me, communicating, but it's very important that this court reporter in front of you just get an answer. So,
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. How about from a national? What kind of? If you had come across it on TV, was it just in one of the local stations or national news or?
Just like Fox News and local.
Do you remember any commentary about the case on Fox News or local news?
No.
Okay. And when you came across it in terms of a breaking news type thing, I know now that all the stations do it just about. Do you remember on Fox News where you watch a particular show that you like to watch that this would come on? Or do you remember if it was in the morning or evening or in the middle of the day?
I guess more in the evening. I just got a TV, to be honest. So I never watched television, no.
You're not until how recently did you get? When did you get the TV?
2 weeks ago.
How long?
Like 2 weeks ago.
Wow. Okay. So prior to 2 weeks ago, your exposure in terms of TV, would it just been with family or at work or how?
Like lunch break at work in the break room.
Prior to this, how did you become aware of what was going on, just like what the weather was? Was it through radio or the internet?
With this case?
Yeah.
Just comments from people.
Okay.
Just that.
Aside from this case, your knowledge of just what's going on in the world or locally in the news, prior to getting your TV, what was your source?
I would talk to people or go on CNN to see what's current, what's happening.
And would you go online at all?
Yeah.
You have access to a computer of some kind? Okay. Are you involved in any kind of social media, be it Facebook or any of those other types of social media? Okay. When you would go on Facebook, did you come across any stories related to this case?
Not to this case, no.
Okay. Would you, in any way, in your Facebook contact with friends, etc., would you pick up on commentary about this case? People give an opinion one way or the other?
Not in this case, no.
Okay. So tell me as best you can in terms of co-workers, and I know you work, so you have to tell us, because we've got both sides have got it written it down. But at work, you would talk to people about the case, or people would talk to you about the case?
Just recently, people talk that the cases has started, happening and that sort of thing, but no details. Okay. Especially now, I tell them, don't talk to me about it.
Sure. And I know you've abided by the judge's instructions in terms of not talking about the case. Prior to coming down here on Monday, or whatever day, did you come on Monday or you came on Tuesday?
Last Monday.
Okay. Because we've had so many jurors, I couldn't remember whether it was Monday or Tuesday, and the court told you, judge told you, Nelson, that you cannot talk about the case and be exposed to it. Prior to that, people at work had talked to you about the case?
Not to me directly, just among themselves at the
place you work?
Yeah.
Okay.
That it was occurring, but really no details.
Okay. What do you remember, if I were to ask you, what do you remember at all them discussing about the case?
I heard Mr. Zimmerman's name. Just names. Yeah, that's all.
Okay. Are you one of those individuals who just not care about what's going on in the news, in the sense of not wanting to watch the news and pay attention to what's going on?
No, I do care about current events, but certain cases and things I don't follow.
Is that intentional that you do that?
Yeah.
Okay. And why is that? You just don't?
I guess it depends on what it's about, or if it's related to my field, then I definitely research it to find out how it affects my patients or me, or but certain cases I don't follow.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. And mention also family. What do you recall of any discussions about the case with family?
None really. No.
Were they as excited as you were when you got the jury summons about coming down here and serving as a juror? And I say that I realize that most people do not get overly excited, but when did they discuss it at all with you in terms of coming down and be a juror?
Just you'll be in a room all day and just that sort of thing. But
prior to you getting the summons, had there been any discussions at all about the case, even in passing by family members?
Not family, no.
Your family also does not like to talk about cases?
Not really.
Okay. Did they talk at all about if there was anything related in the community to this case, whether there was any discussion of what was going on in town, if there was something going on?
I'm sorry, what was it?
In other words, forget about state of Florida versus George Zimmerman or George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin. Was there any discussions at all about the case, in terms of high-profile case, or what was going on in the community related to this case?
No.
Okay. So nobody at home or at family talked about, yeah, this is going on or this is not going on? Do you remember at any time in your limited contact with this case whether you saw any photographs related to this case?
No.
No photographs at all?
No.
Okay. And again, it's perfectly all right to say no, that's the answer. I'm just trying to kind of prod there. Do you remember looking at any photographs of George Zimmerman, if there were any?
Again, just a passing commercial. They would show his face on TV briefly, but that was all.
Just a photo of what he looked like, just like in court you're talking about? Okay.
Yes.
Any photographs you recall of Trayvon Martin?
No. Once again, his face, but honestly, I don't remember what he looks like either.
Looked like at all? Okay. Do you recall hearing any kind of recordings, if there are any recordings related to this case?
No.
Okay. Do you recall any kind of video, if there is video related to this case? You remember anything about that? You know, nowadays we have the phenomenon of not just reporting news, but we also have commentary about what the news means, right? Mm-hmm. You've heard those type of people talking on TV or online?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you listen to or read about any commentary relating to people's opinions or just discussions about this case?
No.
Or any facet of either George Zimmerman or Trayvon Martin or anything else related to this?
No.
If you weren't a juror and somebody good friend of yours came from out of town, they hadn't heard about this case, they said, what the heck is going on in Sanford? What the heck is going on in Seminole County? You know, what's this all about? What would you tell them?
That I don't know.
Okay. They said, what's this about George Zimmerman? What would you tell them?
I don't know.
Same thing with Trayvon Martin?
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I gather when you answered the question in terms of you have not formed an opinion as to the defendant's guilt or innocence, you're still firm on that belief. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. And you're not leaning one way or the other, even if you haven't formally formed an opinion.
No.
How about with family or friends? Are they leaning one way or the other, like he's guilty or he's innocent or anything at all?
Mm-mm.
Is that a no?
That's a no.
How about co-workers? Anybody at work express an opinion like they're leaning one way or the other, either he should be prosecuted or he shouldn't?
I don't let them talk about it.
Huh?
I don't let them talk about it.
You don't?
I asked them not to talk about it.
Is that on purpose?
Yes.
And why is that?
Because I could possibly be a juror.
I apologize. I'm talking about before you found out that you were going to be a juror. I know you're abiding by the courts. I'm talking about, like, let's say 6 months ago.
Oh, no.
Okay. No discussions, maybe 9 months ago. No discussions at all about the case or what's happening related to this case?
No.
How about a year ago? Any discussions at all? How about back in March, February, this happened in February, March, April, any discussions at work about, like, what's going on related to this case?
No.
Were they discussing it and you just didn't pay attention to it, or you just kind of told them not to, or you just don't remember any discussion at all?
I don't remember having any discussions that long ago.
Okay. Make sure my question was clear in terms of understanding what I was asking. Before you got the summons on Facebook or any internet site, you never came across a story other than, or did you come across a story as best you can recall?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Are you one of those individuals that goes on YouTube just to find out what's going on in the world?
I'll look at CNN occasionally to see what's going on, but not regarding this case. No.
Okay. Nothing related to this case.
No.
And on YouTube, did you come across any commentary at all related to this case, or any kind of videos related to it? The limited knowledge, or CNN and all that stuff, do you always believe what's told in the media about a thing?
No.
Okay, why is that?
I knew of a certain situation that the media covered one time and it wasn't accurately portrayed, so I just take it with a grain of salt.
Was that a long time ago that happened?
6 months.
Okay. And was that a case that's happening in here locally, or was it just somewhere else in the world?
It was local.
It was local. Did that, if it impacts you specifically, don't refer to your name at all now, but did that impact you specifically? Did you know any of the parties, I'm going to call them, or that impacted the story?
They were friends, yeah.
Okay. And so, but prior to that, you hadn't really paid attention to the media. Did that kind of reinforce in your mind that the media doesn't get things accurately?
That case didn't have a certain impact. Just, I guess I've always known that media, may twist the story a little bit to make it more entertaining, or, so.
So that was somebody you knew that was the media put a certain slant against this person, or?
And not intentionally, but yes.
Okay. And did you feel the media mistreated the person in terms of at least what they reported?
I guess so.
I don't know right now. I'm trying to be as vague as you can in terms of not referring to the person, if that makes sense. But I guess you said 6 months ago or 6 weeks ago. I misunderstood.
About 6 months ago, and it wasn't a case in court or anything. It was just kind of a story that the news had covered. And I don't have anything against media at all. I just know sometimes there's truth, sometimes there's not.
So it was a story. It was not a pending case. Right. This person wasn't being prosecuted or whatever.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes.
It was just a story that they told about a person, and you knew that to be inaccurate, I guess, because did you know the person?
Right.
Okay. And the person told you that was inaccurate, or you had been like a witness to something happening?
I'm close to the family, and discussing with them, they said just don't believe everything just yet. Yeah.
Okay. So that kind of reinforced in your mind that the media, you knew one example, I guess, of where the media got it wrong?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other source that you believe you may have been exposed to in this case that I haven't covered?
No.
Okay. I don't have a moment. The other part of the questionnaire had the hardship, the potential hardship, and we know where you work. So here's the question. We ask people to come from their everyday lives and jobs, and to take time to serve as jurors, and we realize that's a hardship on most people, and we realize it's a sacrifice. But that's the only way our system works, is to ask people to come. And so the question is, realizing that it's an inconvenience, in some cases it may be a hardship, we now know that the jury will take, once we pick a jury, the trial will take anywhere from 2 to potentially 4 weeks. And the court has made a determination based on making sure that the media does not in any way impact the jury's decision. In other words, the jury's arrive at a decision only on what happens in the courtroom as opposed to outside influences from the media, etc. The question is, would that be an insurmountable hardship for you, the fact that you will be sequestered? Or do you believe you can go ahead and serve and do your civic duty?
I believe I could.
Okay. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Romero.
Thank you. Morning, Matt.
Morning.
Have you ever been in a courtroom in this situation before?
Not this situation.
Okay. I'm going to lay the stage for a second. Of course, Judge Nelson, the judge in the case. Prosecution on this side, defense on this side. So that's why we go back and forth and answer some questions. The state obviously asked you first.
Okay.
And my name is Mark Romero, Don West, my co-counsel. My client is George Zimmerman, sitting in the middle, and Robert Herschel is assisting us at this stage. The whole purpose for talking to you now individually is because there may be a chance that you know or have found out something about this case that is so significant that you might not be able to set it aside. So we find out about that, talk to you about it, try to convince you to set it aside, and then if you can, great, then you may get to sit in that behind you, which is the jury box. So this is the start of that process. It sounds to me, from what you answered to Mr. DeLeon's questions, is that you don't know very much about the case, correct?
Correct.
And that you don't pay a great deal of attention to the news unless it is something that sort of spikes your interest. Is that sort of accurate?
Yes.
And you somehow were able to make it without having a TV until at least 2 weeks ago?
Right.
Okay. Of course, the judge has told you already that should you stay in this process, or continue on to be a member of the jury, that you can't look at all at any outside media sources or anything, because we don't want you to be sort of infected or at least affected by that information. Do you understand why?
Yes.
Okay. You gave an example of a hesitancy to listen to the media because of something that your friends had gone through.
Right.
Okay. That's a very similar concern to the one we're trying to address here. We don't know what you've heard, and our greatest fear would be that we don't talk to you about it in this setting, and it comes up to you when you're sitting over there. Mm-hmm. So, with that as sort of a premise, I want to just sort of drill in a little bit to what you've heard, what you've known, just to make sure that something doesn't pop into your mind. And then we'll talk about what happens if it does later. Okay?
Okay.
So, Mr. Diller, I'm going to ask you the question, what would you tell a friend? And I'm going to just take another stab at it, maybe.
Okay.
But I know you've told us how little you do know about the facts of the case. But if I told you that I want you to start with telling me how many times, from any source, family, friends, those little blurbs you saw on somebody else's TV or the one at work, how many is the gross number of inputs that you've had that have anything to do with the Zimmerman case? I'm not going to question you about them individually, but just if you had to attach a number to it.
Five.
Okay. And those would mostly have come from the blurbs on TV, I think you mentioned, correct?
Commercials.
Commercial. This is what we call sort of those little teasers where they say, coming up at 6 or something.
Yeah.
You have to say yes or no so
yes.
she gets it. Okay. And then also you mentioned that sometimes at work, other coworkers would be talking about it. Is that true?
Amongst themselves, yes.
Yeah. And that you didn't really involve yourself in that communication?
No.
In that on occasion, when you do look at news, it is sometimes through CNN. Is that correct?
Correct.
Generally speaking, have you noticed any bias in the media, aside from what we've now talked about a little bit?
In general?
Yeah.
Yes.
Describe that for me, if you would.
I guess certain programs are lean towards more one party or not.
Have you noticed any slant towards sensationalism, for example, in the way the media presents information, where they make it look more intriguing or more sexy or more alluring?
I think they do, yes.
Okay. If in fact the information comes to you as a juror in this courtroom, the judge will tell you the only place you can get your information from, in this case, is from the witness stand. They'll be under oath and sworn to tell the truth, and from pieces of evidence. Do you agree that that's the way we're going to handle it?
Yes.
And you're okay with that?
Yes.
If in fact you remember something as a juror that you heard outside the courtroom, can you agree to leave it outside the courtroom?
Yes.
And not let it come into your deliberations?
Yes.
And similarly, if another juror, during the time that you're talking about the case, we call it deliberations, when you're in the back, very precise rules as to how you will go about your deliberations, but when you're back there talking about the case, if some other juror reminds you or says to you, I remember something else that I didn't see in the courtroom. I remember this picture. I remember this statement. But it never came from the witness stand or from evidence. How would you react to that juror?
Tell them that it's not to be used. It didn't happen in the courtroom.
And it's not a trick question. The judge will actually give you some instructions as to what you can consider. I asked that question a couple of days ago, and the potential juror said, I'm going to call a deputy. Probably not bad either, but the judge will give you some instructions as to how to handle that. The main principle being, do not consider anything outside the courtroom. Mm-hmm. You okay with doing that?
Yes.
Can I just have a moment? And lastly, as another potential source where you may get some information, any civic organizations, social clubs, church, where this issue has been discussed?
No.
Are you churchgoer?
Yes.
Have you been present where there have been any sermons or donation requests or prayers given for one side or the other in this case?
No.
Okay. Thanks very much. Appreciate your time. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. You'll remain seated for just a moment. Counsel, when you're ready, approach. And court will be in recess for 15 minutes. Please be seated. We're back on the record. Are we ready to bring the next potential juror in? Defense ready? Okay, thank you. Let's go ahead and bring them in.
Your Honor, I-5.
Please be seated. Good morning, sir. You will continue to be referred to as juror I-5, and the attorneys are going to ask you some questions about the questionnaire that you filled out last Tuesday morning, and we're going to begin with Mr. De La Ronda. You may proceed.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
As Judge Nelson indicated, our inquiry at this time in terms of potential jurors is limited to providing publicity and the other stuff you filled out in the questionnaire. If I understand it correctly, you have stated that you have not formed an opinion as to the defendant's guilt or innocence. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you also stated that all of the information you got was from local news.
Well, I wasn't sure it was only local news. I generally watch cable, like CNN, but yeah, I saw some.
So most of it local, but also national, some national news too?
That's correct.
Okay. And then you stated as far as your knowledge of the case, is the information concerned the killing of Trayvon Martin by George Zimmerman in self-defense?
Yes.
Okay.
That's just general knowledge.
Sure. Okay. And let's go over in terms of the local news. Do you recall what station or what particular, do you favor one local station versus another in terms of obtaining your news?
No, as I said, I generally don't watch local news. So if I watched it, I would have watched it with my spouse, and that probably would have been the Fox channel.
Okay. And you mentioned CNN, the national news.
That's correct.
Okay. What do you recall in terms of being exposed to the media? What do you recall being on TV about the case?
Basically, what I recall is that it appeared on television, and they were talking about the case in general, about there being a killing, and it's supposed to be they called it, I forgot what they called the state law. I forgot the name of what that law is that handles that. Okay. And that they had a case like that, and kind of basically flared out of control because the people that were involved, the individual that was involved, wasn't retained. That's what I remember. That's all I basically remember. Okay.
The individual that was involved was not
the
detained.
Gentleman that was
okay.
defending himself?
Okay.
Yes.
That was the take you got from the media, or is that your impression of what was happening?
That was the take, the way I understood it, watching what I saw on the local media.
Okay.
That's all it was at that point.
Sure. Okay. Do you remember looking at any photographs at all about the case?
No, not particularly.
Okay. Let me digress a minute. Your knowledge of the case, was it at the very beginning? This happened back in February of last year.
Yes.
Okay. Did you become aware of the case at that early stage? Late February, it happened February 26th. So after that, was it your exposure to this case in terms of from the media at that time, and was it continuous throughout up till you were summoned as a juror, or was it more recently? I'm trying to gather. Some people have had contact at the beginning. some throughout, and I'm trying to get an idea of what your knowledge of the case from the media was.
Well, there were actually a couple of stages. The initial media, which is just pretty much high level. The second time was when they had that whole march.
Okay.
In regards when they had the black leaders that came in and they had the whole march in regards to the trial. So that was basically.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about the first part, if we could, the case itself. Did you pay close attention at the very beginning when there was discussion or when there was media discussion of the case?
You mean to detail?
Yeah.
Not really.
Was it just kind of in passing? Just what I'm trying to get is from you as a viewer on TV. Do you watch the news religiously every day at 6 o'clock or in the morning, whatever time?
No. News for me is generally about 7 o'clock in the evening when I get home from work.
Okay, all right. When you get home from work at 7 o'clock, you turn on the TV, the news is going on.
Right.
Do you do that pretty much every day or periodically? Or
pretty religiously.
Okay, all right. And at some point you heard about this case?
That's correct.
Okay. What do you recall about the facts, if there were any that you remember at this time about the case? What did it involve? Other than what you've told us already, anything else you can remember? Do you remember looking at any photographs on TV about the case?
No photographs. As I said, the first contact with the case or hear about the case was on a local station, probably sitting with my wife. Any other contact would have came with cable. And my contact, just like I said, would be CNN. And I did happen to switch over to another cable channel, HLN, but that channel was kind of out of control for me.
Is that a what?
Out of control. They like to glorify the news, if you know what I mean.
Sure. Okay.
It just go too far for me.
Okay. Would you agree with the some people's opinions that the media doesn't just report the news, but sometimes they give their opinion kind of as part of it?
Yes.
Okay.
I would say that.
Did you feel in the treatment by the media of this case, were they in favor or leaning or biased one way or the other? And if so, was it at early stages, throughout? And in other words, did that change depending on how the case progressed? Kind of throwing a lot at you right now.
No, it's okay. It's just
I just threw out as I asked you the question. I'm going, God, that was a compound question. And so let me make sure. Let me rephrase it so it makes sense. My question is: did you feel that the media had a slant, depending on what channel or what particular program, one way or the other, in favor of the prosecution of George Zimmerman, or in favor of Trayvon Martin, or in favor of the innocence of George Zimmerman?
The best way I can answer that, I think it would depend on which station you were listening to. There were some news stations where it appeared to be slanted against George Zimmerman.
Okay.
And that was just that one station. That was the HLN for me.
Okay. And so did that turn you off at HLN, or?
Well, yes, it does, but it did. But
okay.
There's a reason for that. I have a hard time with cases tried in the media.
You don't believe in that?
I don't see how you get a fair trial if everything has already been slanted against you before you even get your day in court.
Okay. And you felt HLN was slanted against George Zimmerman?
At the time that I watched it.
Okay. And did you stop watching it then at that time?
I stopped watching HLN.
Okay. And was that because of that, or just in general you don't like HLN because they?
Well, I didn't like the way they were delivering the news. I know everybody has to do their job, but the way they deliver the news, just like I say, it's more than just news. It's glorifying. Okay. You prosecuted an individual, guilty or not, I don't know. But you're prosecuting a person before they had their day in court. That's not the way I understood the law.
Sure. Did you feel there was other stations out there that were doing the opposite, that they were in favor of George Zimmerman to the detriment of Trayvon Martin?
I don't recall that.
Okay.
I don't recall that. Just like I said, I listened to a different station. CNN is the station I watch, and I didn't see that.
Okay. You felt CNN was
more balanced,
objective, more balanced. They would
Right.
get both sides.
Right.
How about from the local media standpoint, the treatment of this case, biased one way or the other, or were they just reporting unbiased, I guess, or not favoring one side or the other?
I don't know about the local station because I normally don't watch them. So
Okay. I asked you, I think about, do you remember any photographs of George Zimmerman? Seeing that on TV?
Him personally?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. How about of Trayvon Martin? Do you remember any photographs of Trayvon Martin on TV?
There were quite a few.
Okay.
Trayvon on television.
Do you remember anything significant about that other than the picture of him?
No, other than the fact they always show the one with him wearing the hoodie and that type of
Okay, all right. How about, do you recall if there were any videos related to this case that you may have come across in your viewing of this case?
stuff. Could you...
Videos, see, I'm not allowed to tell you specifically, do you recall, like let's say it's not related to this case, I couldn't tell you. You remember there being a blue car, and there's not a blue car. I'm just making that up. In other words, I cannot tell you, I can't feed you facts and then go, oh, okay, did that influence you? I'm trying to get from you as best we can what you remember. And my question is, do you remember any kind of listening to or hearing commentary about any kind of recording of any type related to this case?
The only recording that I can recall, no video, but there was a voice recording that they were playing on, I think, and that was on CNN.
Okay.
Where they were trying to determine whose voice they were hearing. But
do you remember there being, do you remember what the take was on that in terms of, other than determining whose voice it was, were the people reporting it or the commentators saying, yeah, it was George Zimmerman's voice, it was Trayvon Martin's voice, or we don't know, or it was somebody else's voice?
at the point that I remember it, they hadn't determined who that was. There was no definitive answer for that.
Did you actually listen to the recording itself, or did you just hear the commentary about the recording?
I heard part of that recording.
In listening to the recording, did you come to a conclusion one way or the other as to whose voice it was?
No.
Do you recall any of the court proceedings, being exposed to any of the court proceedings that have occurred between the time of, February up to this time?
No.
Okay. Do you remember any hearings at all in front of the court, any rulings one way or the other by the court?
No.
Okay. You mentioned in terms of commentary out there, there's been national commentary about the case. Do you recall any local commentary about the case?
No.
Okay. Do you recall any commentary by any of the attorneys involved in the case? That is, myself on behalf of the state of Florida, Mr. Guy or Mr. Manti, these are the other prosecutors, or Mr. O'Mara or Mr. West on behalf of the defendant. Do you recall any commentary, news conferences, or anything like that by either side?
No. The only thing I've heard, and again, my news comes from CNN, is that they reported motions being made to the court to get the case started.
Sure.
But that was about it, not in any great detail.
Yes, sir. Do you remember anything regarding any of those motions that were heard in front of the court?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. You mentioned, let me finish before we get into the second part that you mentioned. Have you had discussions with any individuals, friends or family, regarding this case?
Not only ones that I would have talked to would have been my wife.
Okay. Did she express an opinion as to the guilt or innocence of this defendant, Mr. Zimmerman?
No, not that I'm aware of.
All right. Did she give you any more insight in terms of maybe she had seen something on TV or she had heard something on the radio or had looked in the internet, anything about this case that you recall her telling you about?
No.
Like, really this case involves about, or these facts, anything like that? Do you recall her talking to you about specifics?
No.
Okay. Do you do Facebook or any kind of social media?
No.
Okay. Did you do any, and do you go on the internet at all?
Yes.
Okay. And going in the internet at work or other places, did you come across, there's different types. Sometimes you just come across the headline, and then sometimes you actually get the full story. Do you recall reading anything about this case in the internet?
No. We're not actually supposed to be spending our time doing that.
I wasn't implying that, and by the way, we're on purpose. I wasn't implying that you at work were going on the internet surfing. How about at home, just on the internet, in terms of, some people watch YouTube, Facebook, all that other stuff. You don't partake in that at all?
No social media for me.
Okay.
I've actually, that's what I do for a living. I'm professional.
We know what, we do.
So I don't waste my time with the social media stuff. I mean, it's not a waste of time. It's a waste of my time. My wife is a social media person. Okay. I'm not.
Did your wife give you the benefit of her insight in terms of the social media?
Social media for her is communication with a family, and families spread across the world.
Okay,
so
sure.
they don't get into that type of stuff. So.
You mentioned the march, the black leaders being involved, and tell me as best you can recall what that was about.
Well, I think they were here because from what I can remember, that's when there were complaints, and I can't tell you how the complaints got started. I just can tell you how I think that march got started. Is that the biggest complaints were the fact that the community was upset because Mr. Zimmerman hadn't been locked up. It's the way I remember that, and the black leaders came to I guess to give support, and I don't know, I wasn't sure if that was necessary at that point.
Tell me what you mean by that.
Well, there were times when that kind of thing would have been okay. I'm a child born in the 50s, so I've been through all that, but in that particular point in the case, you have to let the law work. I understand what they were trying to do, but at that point I thought that it may have done more harm than good. And when I say more harm, I'm saying it stirs up feelings that didn't necessarily have to be done at that point. Okay. My opinion.
Sure. No, and of course, that's all that matters right now is your opinion. That's what you're on the stand in the sense as a juror. We're asking you questions about that. Would you hold that against George Zimmerman in any way?
No.
Would you hold that against the state of Florida since we're prosecuting George Zimmerman?
No.
Okay. Would you understand under the law, in arriving at a decision as a juror, you're limited as to what actually happens in the courtroom, the evidence you get in the courtroom, and the law the judge gives you, and obviously your God-given common sense.
Understood.
Can you agree to disregard completely anything related to that march or et cetera?
I would agree with that.
Right? You understand that plays no role at all?
Yes, I understand.
Unless some witness talked about it and it was relevant. Can you agree to do that? Did you think that, let me backtrack a second. You mentioned you were a child of the 50s and 60s. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that today still there is freedom of speech?
We've always had freedom of speech.
Okay. I mean, it existed a long time ago.
Right.
Do you believe people have the right to express their views, and it may be even in a public setting where they and other individuals are present?
Yes. Yes, I do.
I guess what I'm trying to find out in terms of the march, you felt you weren't, were you opposed to the fact that they were expressing themselves, or you just felt it wasn't necessary?
I wasn't opposed to the fact that they were expressing themselves, because we all have freedom of expression. I was opposed to the fact that I didn't think it was necessary at the time.
Okay.
It just causes other things. It just causes a lot of problems when you do things like that.
Sure.
And I don't know if they necessarily do any good at that point.
Okay. Okay. You mentioned also black leaders. Did you mean Reverend Jackson and Reverend Sharpton?
That's correct.
Okay. Did you feel that it was inappropriate for them to come down here and join the rally or the march?
Well, in my opinion,
yeah, and that's all that matters.
I thought it was inappropriate. I didn't think it was necessary. And that's probably a minority opinion, but I think they could have did more if they stayed where they were.
Okay.
It just got the community all roused up.
Okay. Do you understand that your opinions were related to that? Let me ask you this way. Would that factor in any way as to whether this defendant is guilty or innocent?
No.
Okay. Would that make you more in favor of Trayvon Martin or the state, or would it make you more in favor of George Zimmerman, or is it just irrelevant?
It's irrelevant to me.
Okay. You can agree to completely disregard the fact that there was a march and the fact that there was black leaders, and even though you feel that they shouldn't have done that in terms of whatever they caused, that or it was inappropriate or whatever, you feel you can just completely take that off the table. You understand the law requires you under the law to only consider what's in the courtroom. My question is, can you completely disregard that?
Yes, I can.
Okay. But would it still be inside of you going, okay, well, I felt that we're probably out of hand in terms of getting, people riled up or whatever, cause disruption, and this is my opportunity now. I'm going to come back with a verdict because I thought that was inappropriate, even though I think he might be guilty. They shouldn't have done that. In any way, would that factor in?
No, not at all.
You mentioned also in terms of what you understand is the concern, the killing of Trayvon Martin by George Zimmerman in self-defense. Is that in terms of what the media was saying, or what the issue was? I guess what I'm trying to find out, why when you wrote this, and I'm trying to obviously get in your mind as best as possible, you stated concerning the killing of Trayvon Martin by George Martin in self-defense. Are you saying that it was in self-defense, or you haven't formed an opinion as to whether it was or not?
Haven't formed an opinion whether it was, if that's what it is. Actually, I don't know yet.
Okay.
That's just what was being reported.
Right.
That's the way it was reported.
I got you. Okay. And the reason I asked you that is because you mentioned early on when I was asking you questions about that you remember that the case in general, that there was a killing, and you mentioned something about a state law. Is the state law you referencing, is that self-defense law or what?
It's not called self-defense. It's called...
And that's all right if you don't remember. I believe I know what you're talking about.
It's when you feel threatened. I don't know the name of the law.
Okay.
But when you feel threatened, you're allowed to protect yourself.
Okay.
Whatever the name of that state law is, it's that law.
Okay. The coverage of that in the media, did that sway you one way or the other, whether in this case this was that type of case or whether it wasn't?
Well, didn't understand that type of case. Don't understand it well enough. But I understood how that could have happened.
What do you mean by that?
Well, laws, state laws, federal laws, whatever laws, they're all pretty complex. They're not that simple on the surface. So when somebody states a law like that, and I don't know if it's the law written word for word or being spoken word for word, I take it with a grain of salt until you get that matter into the courts and everybody has their day. That's when you have to worry about it.
So you believe in our wonderful system that allows the opportunity to actually have what we're doing now in the process of a trial itself?
Exactly.
Okay. I guess my question in terms of your exposure as to the commentary about the law would not influence you one way or the other about take one side or the other?
No.
You haven't formed, you haven't expressed you don't have any feelings as a result of your exposure to the media one way or the other in this case?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you understand what I'm saying? As you noted in your thing, you haven't formed an opinion as to the guilt or innocence. My question is, have you formed opinions or do you have beliefs, not as to the ultimate issue, but as to whether there's certain parts of this case that have already been decided?
Well, I don't necessarily believe that there's certain parts of the case that's been decided. I would hope not.
Okay. I'm just asking.
But
sure.
I don't have an opinion.
Okay, all right. The other thing I wanted to cover with you, sir, is, I apologize. Two things I want to cover with you. One is the commentators. You know, there has been commentators, or I don't know if were you exposed to any commentators, not just the facts, but people talking about their opinions about what it is or is not, you know, whether it was this type of case or whether it wasn't. Were you exposed to some of that?
Yeah, the HLN channel. I hate to keep.
No, that's all right.
That's the one.
You're not the first juror that's talked and not liking a certain. We all live in this great country. Everybody's entitled to an opinion, so that's what we're trying to find out from you. And this is really our only opportunity, you know, to ask you that kind of stuff. My question is, can you agree that whatever commentary, whatever channel there was discussions about what the evidence is or what is important or what's not important, can you agree that that remains outside the courtroom, that has no role at all in arriving at a decision in this case?
Yes, I can.
Okay. And as part of that also, if somebody from out of town came and they had not heard about this case, assuming that was true, and they came to ask you, they came to town, a good friend of yours, but they had not heard about this case, and you're not a juror, right? And they were to say, what's this case about? What is all this thing about George Zimmerman? What's this about Trayvon Martin? What would you tell them?
I could only tell them what I know.
And what would you tell
them?
them?
Understanding that at this point, if you're asking me as of right now.
Yeah, and assuming you weren't a juror.
Assuming I'm not a juror.
Because then you would be allowed to talk about it, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, assuming that I'm not a juror and you asked me that question today.
Right.
I would tell them that was supposed to be a case that occurred earlier this year, and that is still being tried in the courts. So I don't know. There's a individual that was dead, that got into some type of scuffle. I don't know.
Okay. And if they were to follow up that, if it was a good friend of yours and they were in the habit of asking you questions and they said, scuffle, what did you mean by that? What would you tell them?
Well, it wasn't that somebody, well, the way I understand it.
Yeah, and that's
all.
all
my understanding. It wasn't that somebody just walked up and shot somebody. There was a scuffle.
Okay.
Somebody came out, they were dead.
Okay.
That's all I know.
All right.
It was, it just wasn't that somebody just walked up and just shot somebody.
Sure. And if that individual, that friend of yours, were to ask you, how did it come about? Where did it happen? I know you said it happened in Sanford. They said, where exactly did it happen? What would you tell them?
I don't know.
Okay.
I've never been to that location.
Right.
I just know Sanford.
Sure. And if they were to ask you, well, who was the person that was shot? Who was the person that died? What would you tell them?
I would tell them Trayvon Martin.
Okay. Anything else?
I know that by name because I got that from the news.
Okay. Anything else that you would tell them about that?
No.
Okay. And if they were to tell you George Zimmerman, the person that's been charged with that, what would you tell them about that? About him?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't have an opinion about that, so I don't know.
Okay. All right. What I want to move on to is the issue of, in terms of hardship. And both sides, as does obviously Judge Nelson, realizes that we ask people to come from their everyday lives, and to serve as jurors, it's a sacrifice. It's a hardship. That there's an understanding that it does for everybody. I think almost everybody, because that's the way our system works. That's the only way that good citizens of this country can serve as jurors. They have to make a sacrifice. And, that has existed not just in this case, in every case that's ever taken place in this country. And as a result, we realize that they're going to have to take some time off from work and also from their family. This case, we have estimated as best we can, once we actually get to pick a jury, that is, once a jury is picked, that it will take anywhere from 2 to potentially 4 months. 4 weeks, not 4 months, sorry. 2 to 4 weeks in terms of the term, how long it will take. I misspoke. Just to make sure the record's clear, it was 2 to 4 weeks, not 2 to 4 months. I don't want to be misquoted somewhere out there in outer space. But anyway, assuming that were true, so it takes anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, and also the judge has made a determination that she wants to make sure the jury makes a decision only on what happens in this courtroom as opposed to potentially being exposed to the media. that the jury will be sequestered. And, so there'll be limited contact potentially with family and that kind of stuff. The question is, we realize it's a hardship. Will it be an insurmountable hardship for you to partake in that?
Not insurmountable. The reason I put that there, I mean, from a personal perspective, myself, my wife, because it's just us, that I can handle. The only thing is because we haven't been able to talk to our employers about this. I have a lot of things that I'm responsible for at work. And so I just need to be able to
let them know that you're going to be tied up for a while.
Yeah, okay. And I can't do that at the last moment.
Sure.
Because they have to plan.
Right.
We can plan for it, I think.
Okay. I believe the court will set up, I don't want to speak for Judge Nelson, but I believe, because that's not going to just apply to you, but to a lot of other people, that we realize somehow your employer is going to have to be notified, and there's going to have to be some arrangements for somebody else to take over your task, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And other than that, you can serve. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. If I may have a moment, Your Honor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. West?
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Don West. I'm one of the attorneys on behalf of George Zimmerman, who's seated over here. Mm-hmm. This is Mark O'Mara, and Robert Hirschhorn is also at counsel table helping us with the case at this point. Let me apologize in advance by saying I may move around a little bit with some of my questioning just to avoid covering the same things over. So if it's not clear what I'm getting at, feel free to say that. Okay. And I'm happy to make it more clear or figure out what I mean. So let's talk just for a moment about your source of news. I take it that if you are in charge of the remote, it's going to be on CNN.
That's correct.
And if you're watching TV with your wife, she gets to decide.
Well, yeah. I want to say that no, I'm in control, but that's
only truthful answers here.
Truthful answers, yes. She would have her choice of channel. But we have multiple televisions, so one of us can always move, and it would generally be me. So,
if you're watching though with your wife, it's more likely that she's going to watch the Fox network or local Fox.
She watches local news, but Fox is the channel she would normally watch.
You don't take a particular interest in local news, I take it?
Not normally.
Have you talked about the case at church or any social organization that you may belong to, or even at work?
No, not at all.
I believe I heard you mention that you are involved in social media at work.
No, I don't deal with social media at all.
No, I know that you said you don't do it personally. I thought you said you are involved in social media as part of your job. Did I misunderstand that?
No, we don't use social media. I think you may have heard me say that my wife uses social media, and that's to contract family, because we have families scattered all around the world. Uh-huh. And the way they do it is they use social media to post pictures and to write to each other.
Okay.
But no, I don't use social media at work at all.
You're right. I misunderstood that. In the times that you've watched television, come across something on CNN or local Fox, mm-hmm. or perhaps on HLN, mm-hmm. Have you heard any press conferences involving the lawyers that are in any way connected with the case? And that would include the state attorney's office, defense counsel, counsel for or on behalf of the Martin family.
May have heard, and I wasn't sure if you would call it a press conference, but I may have heard a conference from the attorneys from the Martin family at some point, but nothing that I would have listened to in detail.
Was there any information in that press conference that was addressed, or any opinions offered, comments on the evidence, for example, that sticks with you?
No, I think the press conference was, if I remember correctly, they were preparing to get the case started for trial, but they didn't go into any detail that I remember that I thought was of any significance. So.
Getting ready for trial, are you suggesting that was in the last month or two? Or back at the beginning of when the event took place?
That would have been back probably March, April maybe.
Of this year?
Of this year.
Okay. Yeah. So you took that to be a press conference being given in anticipation of the case proceeding with trial?
That's the way I would have interpreted it, yes.
Do you remember where that was, or what it might have been in response to something happening in the case?
You mean where the people were? Or
yeah. For example, was it in front of the courthouse? Was it at a studio? Was it on the street?
It wasn't in front of the courthouse. It wasn't on the street. I thought it was inside, but I'm not sure where that would have been. I don't remember where that would have been.
Mm-hmm. And do you remember whether comments you may have heard were directed toward any decisions in the case or rulings that the judge may have made?
Not that I don't think so. I don't remember anything like that.
Okay. If you do, while we're talking here today, just indicate that. Otherwise, we'll move on to something else. Have you heard any press conferences that you're aware of where Mr. O'Mara or someone else on behalf of the defense may have made a public statement?
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of. He may have had some, but I haven't seen them.
And has your wife or other family members, have any of them made comments to you that they heard a press conference or they heard comments about the case that stuck out in their mind that they were going to pass on?
There's only two of us, my wife and I. Mm-hmm. And she hasn't mentioned anything like that to me. So,
does she, if you're able to gauge, take more of an interest or less of an interest in this case than you do?
Don't really know, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. I would think not, because if she did, she probably would have talked to me at length about it, and we haven't had any conversations like that. Have there been other news events, we'll use generally, and even specific court cases where there has been an interest that you and she have talked about in some detail? Not talking about this case? Correct. Oh, yes. The Tracy Anthony case was one that we talked about. That was a subject of conversation. What was happening in the case along the way? Yeah, it's so crazy. I couldn't believe that was a trial, but yeah, we talked about that. You've made comments today already how you think the media may have a slant on certain news stories. Do you feel that way about Casey Anthony, since you've seen it now from beginning to end? I didn't see it from beginning to end, but yeah, there were certain stations that they had a severe slant on what they were talking about. I mean, I don't know, but it's that same station. So, and I don't know why, but that's just where it happens in my mind. So if, in your mind anyway, if you're looking for a place to get information that you feel comfortable with or confident is being accurately reported, you wouldn't necessarily go to that station. You might go to a different one, I guess. Yes. That's your opinion of the sensational or glorification? That's correct. Okay. Of people, maybe I don't know if anyone has actually expressed an opinion to you about their view of the case, but if there are people that have, I'm curious to know, this would include
extended family members, people that know about the case, since it is international news, if you would agree with that. Is anyone, if of those that may have expressed an opinion, could you give a rough estimate of the percentage of people that have expressed their opinion that might be supportive more of George Zimmerman versus supportive more of the prosecution?
I don't have any family that has expressed that at all. So we just don't talk about those things. Our family is so large that when we get together, we talk about family.
You don't have time for this.
Yeah, we don't talk about things like this.
In any of the news exposure that you've had to the case, recognizing that it's quite limited, have you heard anything about George Zimmerman's background or Trayvon Martin's background?
Background in what shape or form?
Well, without suggesting an answer, for example, just generally, do you know where Trayvon Martin was from?
He's from here. I think I did hear, and I may be wrong, so allow for that. I think his family originally came from Miami, and he was up here with his father. I think. I don't know all those details,
sure.
So I'm just guessing right now, but I think that's what I heard.
We're not asking...
haven't heard anything about Mr. Zimmerman.
At this point, there's nothing that you've heard in the press that you can remember that is connected with Mr. Zimmerman, any more details about the events themselves or any of his background?
If you're talking about a connection with Mr. Zimmerman, the only connection with Mr. Zimmerman and Trayvon that would have had was the encounter in the complex where they were on that particular night. Other than that, nothing.
For example, did you know anything about what Mr. Zimmerman may have been doing in the community where the event occurred?
Oh, well, Mr. Zimmerman lived there. I understood.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I understood he was neighborhood watch.
Okay, sure.
That's what I know.
Part of the general knowledge of the case that's been out in the media?
Right.
Did you hear anything about what led up to the actual shooting that you can remember that sticks out in your mind about George Zimmerman, neighborhood watch, his contact with Trayvon Martin?
No detail there.
You've commented that that there's an emotionally charged aspect of this case in the context of the marches.
In my opinion.
Right. Solely in your opinion.
Right.
What do you think that was about? What is it that's going on in your mind when you say it sort of stirred people up or riled people up?
Well, okay, I'm going back to the marches when I was a child, right? They're always emotional when you get your particular community leaders or national leaders, because generally when you have a march, most people feel that you've been wronged in some shape, form, or fashion.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I see it. And that's why I would think that would be emotionally charged. Because if the community felt, in my mind, if they felt that they had been wronged, and you've got your national leaders there, I can't help it. That's what's going to happen.
Obviously, you are familiar with Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson, just from the news, if nothing else.
Yes, I am.
Have you ever attended an event where they were present?
No.
I take it you didn't attend any of the events in this case?
No.
Were you aware that there were events here and other places?
Yes, I don't know about other places, but I know in Florida, here in the Seminole County area, yes.
Did you have the feeling from the news that there was a racial aspect to this case connected with the marches?
Not from the news, but just from experience of in my own life. You bring the two together, that's generally what's coming out of it. That's why I meant by it wasn't appropriate to have that march, in my mind.
When you say not appropriate, I'm just drilling down a little bit on that. If you can explain that.
I just didn't think that having the national black leaders in the community was necessary at that point in time. The community may have felt that, but me as an individual, I didn't think that was appropriate because of the feelings that would come out of it. I mean, and it could become racially charged. That's what I was thinking, because there's no reason for them to really be here at that point. I just didn't think it was necessary.
Did you think from the information you had about the case, and I know it was limited, but you know that it was in a community that George Zimmerman was reportedly connected with Neighborhood Watch, etc. Did you think there was a racial aspect to the case?
I wouldn't have thought that at that time. So I don't know. I would have to say no to that question.
Do you at this point have any reason to think there is actually a racial component to the shooting of Trayvon Martin?
I would still say no at this point. I try to use fact to guide what I think. And at this point, I would say no, because we haven't proved that. That hasn't been proved anywhere that I'm aware of.
Agreed. You pointed out that your sense of why the marches or demonstrations took place was a community reaction to the delay in arresting George Zimmerman. Did I get that correctly?
That's the way I understood it based on some of the things that I'd heard on the news. And I think I even heard that on CNN. I don't think I saw that in local news, but that's where that came from.
Did you agree with that? Did you think that there was a delay and that was somehow unreasonable or inappropriate?
I'm not sure if I could agree with it, because if there was a delay, I as a citizen wouldn't know that at all. So at the point that I was referring to, I had no idea if there was a delay or not. I could have only gotten that from the media.
Is it within the information that you received through the media around the time this happened that George Zimmerman was not arrested and charged the night of the shooting or within the next few days?
See, all of the information that I heard I think some time had already passed since that shooting occurred. So I have no idea of whether Mr. Zimmerman had been arrested or not until I heard that on the news.
When you became aware of the organized assembly, the demonstrations and marches and such, did you have a sense at that time, or do you even know now, whether or not George Zimmerman had been arrested at that point?
I couldn't tell you that. I have no idea.
Is there anything you've heard in the news or sort of assembled from any source of information that makes you think the Sanford Police Department did anything wrong in the way they investigated the case? Me personally, no. But
in some of the news reports when I think they were the first time, and I'm going to say it, and this is nothing against either side, but first time I had heard anything about the Sanford Police doing anything wrong is when they brought in the Attorney General in to look at the case. That I know I saw on CNN, and that's when they were talking about something, not that they did wrong, but I guess some parts of it wasn't handled properly. So that's about all I can tell you on that one.
From what you heard on the news about that, did you conclude that if the Sanford Police Department hadn't done something wrong, that the Attorney General wouldn't have gotten involved?
Not necessarily. I wouldn't say that necessarily. You don't have enough facts to come to conclusions like that. So I wouldn't necessarily have said that.
Do you know what, if any, decisions the Attorney General or the Governor may have made in connection with this case?
No.
Is there anything that you know about this case that makes you think that it's a civil rights case?
No.
Have you ever formed an opinion or an impression whether I'll just say it. Did you ever wonder if George Zimmerman had been black, would he have been arrested the night the shooting took place?
I don't think so. Not that I'm aware of. I generally don't think like that.
Mm-hmm. Were you content, are you still content, to let the legal process take its course?
I think that's the only way it can work.
And to the extent that you have information, right or wrong, connected with the case, or have heard the opinions or expressions or are aware of the conduct of others in connection with the case, if selected for the jury, are you confident that you're able to make your decision based only on the evidence that you hear in these four walls and the laws, the legal instructions that Judge Nelson gives you?
100% confident.
Thank you.
If you'll still remain seated for a moment, and counsel, when you're there might be more questions. Counsel, when you're ready, come up to the bench. Thank you. Okay, we are going to be in recess until 1:10.